The morning sun slanted through the windshield of my old Buick as I pulled into Henderson's Auto Sales, my granddaughter Marion chattering beside me about college applications and her dreams of studying journalism. At 15, she had her mother's sharp eyes and her father's gentle heart. My son John had raised her well, despite everything. We weren't there to buy anything, really. I'd promised Marion I'd help her learn about car values and negotiation tactics, practical knowledge for when she'd eventually need her first vehicle. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Look at that one, Grandma. Marion pointed toward a silver SUV near the back of the lot. Then her voice changed, dropping to something between confusion and alarm. Wait, Grandma, that's Mom's car. I followed her gaze, my heart performing an unwelcome flutter. The vehicle sat between a red pickup and a white sedan, its distinctive scratch along the passenger door immediately recognizable. 3 months ago, my daughter-in-law Wilma had reported that exact car stolen from the grocery store parking lot. I remembered the afternoon vividly. Her tearful phone call to John, the police report, the insurance claim that had supposedly been processing ever since. Are you sure, sweetheart? I kept my voice steady, though my pulse had quickened. Positive. See that dent on the bumper? I was with her when she backed into the post at the mall last year. And that scratch, she always said it looked like a lightning bolt. I parked my Buick and sat for a moment, my hands still on the steering wheel. At 68, I'd learned that jumping to conclusions led nowhere good, but I'd also learned to trust my instincts, and right now, every nerve in my body was signaling danger. Let's just look around, I told Marion, patting her hand. Maybe we're mistaken. But we weren't mistaken. As we approached the SUV, I could see the tiny rainbow sticker Marion had placed on the rear window 2 birthdays ago, barely visible, but definitely there. My stomach tightened into a familiar knot, the same sensation I'd felt when I'd found discrepancies in the family business accounts years ago, before John had taken over. A salesman materialized beside us, all white teeth and eager handshake. Beautiful vehicle, isn't it? Just came in last week. Low mileage, excellent condition. We can make you a very good deal today. When exactly did you acquire it? I asked, keeping my tone casual, grandmotherly. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through records. Let me see. Arrived on the lot on September 15th. Previous owner sold it to us outright. Wanted a quick sale. We gave her a fair price. September 15th. I felt Marion tense beside me. Wilma had reported the car stolen on September 17th, just 2 days later. The mathematics of deception were crystal clear. Could I see the sales documents? I asked. I'm interested, but I like to know a vehicle's history. The salesman hesitated, then smiled. Of course, of course. Let me get the file from the office. You folks take a look around, and I'll be right back. As soon as he was out of earshot, Marion grabbed my arm. Grandma, she sold it and then reported it stolen. That's fraud, isn't it? Hush now, I whispered, though my mind was racing. Let's not assume anything until we see those documents. But when the salesman returned with the file folder, my worst suspicions crystallized into cold certainty. The bill of sale listed a seller named Wilma Morrison. Wilma's maiden name, not the Matthews surname she'd taken when she married John 6 years ago. The address was one I didn't recognize, somewhere on the east side of town. The signature looked like Wilma's flowing script, but something about it seemed slightly off. The loops too perfect, too practiced. This address, I said, pointing. Do you verify these things? We run standard checks, the salesman said, his enthusiasm dimming slightly as he sensed a complication. The title was clean, no liens. The seller had proper identification. What kind of identification? He shifted uncomfortably. Driver's license, matching the name on the sale documents. I thanked him and told him I needed to think about it, promising to return if we decided to move forward. Marion stayed quiet until we were back in my Buick, then exploded with questions. What are we going to do? We have to tell Dad, right? And the police? Grandma, she committed a crime. I started the engine but didn't pull out of the parking spot immediately. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of discovery, of knowing that I'd stumbled onto something that could tear my already fragile family apart even further. John had married Wilma during a vulnerable time in his life, 2 years after his first wife, Marion's mother, had died from cancer. Wilma had seemed like a blessing then, a vibrant woman who brought light back into my son's eyes. But over the past 6 years, I'd watched her slowly isolate John from his friends, from me, from the life he'd built before her. She controlled their finances, made all major decisions, and had a way of twisting every conversation to make herself the victim and everyone else the villain. "We need to be smart about this, Marion," I said finally. "If we go to your father now, Wilma will find a way to explain it away or turn it around. We need more information first." "But it's evidence of fraud." "It is, but it's also just the beginning, I think." I looked at my granddaughter, seeing the journalist she'd become someday in the determined set of her jaw. "Something tells me this is bigger than one fake car theft." I drove us to the Riverside Diner, our traditional spot for important conversations. Over coffee and pie, apple for me, cherry for Marion, I laid out what I knew, speaking quietly, even though the nearest customers were 3 booths away. "Your father's been distant lately," I said. "When I call, Wilma always answers. She says he's busy, stressed with work. But the landscaping company your grandfather and I built, that your father runs now, it's always been steady. There's no reason for unusual stress. She doesn't let me see Dad alone anymore either," Marion admitted, poking at her pie. "Every time I ask to spend time with just him, she finds a reason to come along or schedules something else." "When's the last time you were in their house?" Marion thought about it. 2 months? Maybe more? She always suggests we meet at restaurants or the park. A pattern was emerging, one I didn't like. Isolation, control, and now, clear evidence of financial fraud. The insurance payout on that SUV would have been substantial, probably $30,000 or more. What had Wilma done with that money? Where had it gone? "I need to do some research," I told Marion. Quietly. "Can you keep this between us for now?" "Not even your Aunt Rachel." Rachel was my daughter, Marion's aunt. And while I loved her dearly, she had the discretion of a megaphone. If I told Rachel, the whole family would know within hours. Marion nodded solemnly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out what else Wilma is hiding," I said. Because people who commit fraud once rarely stop there. I dropped Marion at her friend's house, she was staying there for the weekend, and drove home to the modest 2-bedroom house I'd lived in for 40 years. My husband Frank had died 3 years ago, leaving me the house and a comfortable but not extravagant retirement. I'd stayed active, volunteering at the library, tending my garden, attending book club. People saw me as a harmless elderly woman, pleasant and polite. That was fine with me. People underestimated harmless elderly women, and that could be very useful. I made myself tea and settled at my kitchen table with my laptop, a necessity I'd mastered despite my children's initial skepticism. I started with public records, searching for the address on that bill of sale. It led to a small apartment complex on the east side, exactly as I'd noted. I cross-referenced it with property records and found that particular unit was rented under the name V. Morrison. Wilma had rented an apartment under her maiden name. Why would she need a separate residence when she lived in a beautiful home with John? I dug deeper, accessing the county recorder's website, searching for any documents filed under either name. That's when I found the first really troubling piece. A business registration filed 3 months ago for Morrison Consulting LLC, with Wilma listed as the sole proprietor, and that East Side address as the business location. John had never mentioned Wilma starting a business. In fact, she'd always insisted she was too busy managing their household to work outside the home. My phone rang, making me jump. It was John. "Hi, Mom," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Just checking in. Haven't talked to you in a few days." "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you?" "Busy. The business is, well, it's been challenging lately. Some clients haven't paid on time, and we've had equipment issues." He sighed. "Wilma's been helping me manage the stress. She's been great about handling the financial side of things, taking that burden off me." My grip tightened on the phone. Wilma was handling the financial side of the business? The business my late husband had built from nothing, that John had grown and nurtured for 15 years? That's good she's helping, I managed. Is Marion still coming to stay with you next weekend? Actually, about that. Wilma suggested maybe Marion should wait a bit. We're doing some renovations, lots of dust and noise. Wouldn't be comfortable for her. Renovations. Another convenient excuse to keep people away from the house. I understand, I lied. Well, I'll let you go. Love you, John. Love you too, Mom. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my kitchen, not bothering to turn on the lights. The pieces were assembling themselves into a picture I didn't want to see. Financial control, isolation, hidden business ventures, insurance fraud. And now, apparently, Wilma had her hands on the landscaping company's finances too. I thought about my late husband, Frank, about the decades we'd spent building that business together, the early mornings and late nights, the pride we'd felt watching John take it over and make it even better. If Wilma was embezzling from the company, she wasn't just stealing from John, she was destroying Frank's legacy. My phone buzzed with a text from Marion. Did you find anything? I typed back, some things. Need to keep investigating. Remember, not a word to anyone. I promise. Be careful, Grandma. I smiled at her concern. At 68, I'd been through a husband's death, 2 childbirth experiences, the near bankruptcy of our business in the 80s, and my daughter's messy divorce. I'd learned that being careful didn't mean being passive. It meant being smart. I returned to my laptop, but this time I searched for something specific. Wilma's financial history before she married John. It took some digging, but I eventually found records of 2 previous marriages, both ending in divorce. In one case, there'd been a restraining order filed by the ex-husband, though the details were sealed. A woman with secrets and a pattern of behavior. A woman who'd entered my son's life when he was vulnerable and gradually taken control of everything. I was about to close my laptop when one more search occurred to me. I typed Morrison Consulting LLC into a business database search engine and waited. The results made my blood run cold. The company had been registered with the state as a financial consulting firm. Its listed services included asset management, financial restructuring, and estate planning. And in the past 3 months, it had received transfers totaling over $150,000 from Matthews Landscaping LLC, my son's company. Wilma wasn't just committing insurance fraud. She was systematically draining the family business, funneling money into her own secret company. And if my instincts were correct, the car insurance scam was just the smallest piece of a much larger, more dangerous scheme. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof that would stand up in court and force John to see the truth about the woman he'd married. But gathering that proof would require me to do things I'd never done before. To investigate, to snoop, potentially to break rules I'd followed my entire law-abiding life. The question was, how far was I willing to go to save my son and protect my late husband's legacy? As I sat there in the darkness, I realized the answer was simple, as far as necessary. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table making lists, drawing connections, mapping out what I knew and what I needed to discover. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't elaborate, but it was methodical. The same approach Frank and I had used when we'd rebuilt the business after our accountant had embezzled from us 30 years ago. Document everything. Verify everything. Trust nothing. My first stop Monday morning was the bank where John kept the business accounts. I'd been a co-signer on those accounts since Frank died, a precaution John and I had agreed upon in case anything happened to him. I hadn't needed to access them in years, but the authorization was still valid. The bank manager, a pleasant woman named Patricia, whom I'd known for a decade, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Matthews, what a lovely surprise. What can we do for you today?" "I need to review the Matthews landscaping accounts," I said, keeping my voice light and casual. "Just doing some end-of-year planning." Her smile flickered. "Of course, although I should mention that Mrs. Wilma Matthews was here last week and requested some changes to the account structure. Let me pull up the records." My heart sank as Patricia turned to her computer. Changes to the account structure. Nothing good ever followed those words. "Here we are," Patricia said, her brow furrowing slightly. "It looks like she had herself added as the primary account holder and... oh, Mrs. Matthews, it appears your co-signer status was removed on her request. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Removed? On what grounds? She presented a document signed by your son, authorizing the changes. She explained that you were getting older and that the family wanted to simplify the management structure. Patricia's discomfort was evident. I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew about this. I forced myself to breathe normally, to keep my expression neutral. Of course. I must have forgotten. You know how it is at my age. I added a self-deprecating laugh that made me feel sick. Could I at least see the transaction history for the past 6 months? For my personal records? Patricia hesitated, glancing at her computer screen. I'm afraid I can't provide that without authorization from the current account holder. Bank policy. I really am sorry. I left the bank feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Wilma had outmaneuvered me, cutting off my access to the very evidence I needed. Worse, she'd done it using my own son's signature. Whether John had known what he was signing, or whether Wilma had slipped it into a stack of documents, I couldn't be sure. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel and forced myself to think. If I couldn't access the bank records directly, I needed another approach. I pulled out my phone and called Jerry Hoskins, the company's accountant for the past 12 years. Mrs. Matthews, Jerry's warm voice filled my ear. Good to hear from you. How are you doing? I'm well, Jerry. Listen, I have a question about the business accounts. Have you noticed anything unusual in the past few months? There was a pause, long enough to make my pulse quicken. Actually, I'm glad you called. I've been meaning to talk to John about some irregularities, but every time I try, Wilma says he's too busy and that she'll handle it. The thing is, there are some transfers I can't quite account for. What kind of transfers? Large ones, 50, 60,000 at a time, going to something called Morrison Consulting. Wilma told me it's a legitimate business expense, some kind of financial advisory service. But I've never heard of them, and when I tried to research the company, all I found was a basic LLC registration. No website, no references, nothing. Morrison Consulting. My secret discovery confirmed by an outside source. Jerry, I need you to do something for me. Can you compile a complete record of all transfers to Morrison Consulting and any other unusual transactions? And can you do it quietly? Another pause. Mrs. Matthews, is something wrong? I'm not sure yet, but I need that information before I talk to John. Can you help me? I'll have it ready by tomorrow morning. Should I email it to you? No. Too easy to trace. Can I pick it up from your office? Absolutely. I'll have it ready. After hanging up, I sat in the bank parking lot, my mind racing. I had an accountant who'd noticed the irregularities. That was good. But I'd lost access to the bank accounts, which was very bad. Wilma was building walls around her operation, securing her position. My phone rang. It was my daughter, Rachel. Mom, I just got off the phone with John. He sounds terrible. Is everything okay with the business? I chose my words carefully. Why? What did he say? He said they're having some cash flow problems, that they might need to let some employees go. He sounded stressed. I asked if he needed help, but Wilma got on the line and said they had it under control, that John was just being pessimistic. Cash flow problems. Of course there were cash flow problems. Wilma was bleeding the business dry. Did John mention anything else? He said something about maybe selling the equipment, downsizing. Mom, that business was Dad's whole life. If John is thinking about dismantling it, Rachel's voice cracked with emotion. Don't worry, I said, with more confidence than I felt. I'm looking into it. Looking into what? Mom, what's going on? I couldn't tell Rachel, not yet. She meant well, but she'd confront John directly, and that would alert Wilma before I had enough proof. Just some accounting questions, nothing to worry about yet. I'll let you know if I find anything significant. Rachel wasn't satisfied, but she let it go. After we hung up, I drove to Marion's school, arriving just as the final bell rang. I'd texted her earlier, asking her to meet me in the parking lot. She emerged with her backpack, looking around cautiously before sliding into my car. Did you find more stuff? She asked immediately. I told her about the bank, about my removed access, about Jerry's confirmation of the transfers. Marion's eyes widened with each revelation. She's stealing from Dad's company right in front of him, Marion said, her voice shaking with anger. We have to tell him now. Not yet. We need ironclad proof. Right now, Wilma can explain everything away. She'll say the account changes were for efficiency, that Morrison Consulting is legitimate, that I'm a confused old woman who doesn't understand modern business practices. But you're not confused. You're the smartest person I know. I smiled at her fierce loyalty. Thank you, sweetheart. But smart isn't enough. I need documentation that even John can't ignore. Which brings me to why I picked you up. I need your help with something that might be morally questionable. Marion leaned forward, her journalist instincts fully engaged. What do you need? I need to get into your father's house when Wilma isn't home. I need to see what she's hiding there. That's breaking and entering. Technically, it's entering without permission. John is my son. I've had a key to his house for years. I pulled the spare key from my purse, the one John had given me when he first bought the place. The question is whether Wilma has changed the locks. And if she has, then we find another way in. Are you willing to help me? Marion didn't hesitate. Absolutely. When? Wilma has a standing appointment at the salon every Tuesday afternoon, 2 o'clock. It usually takes her 3 hours. John will be at work. That's our window. We spent the rest of the drive planning. Marion would stand watch while I searched the house. If anyone came home early, she'd text me with a code word. It felt surreal, plotting a clandestine operation with my teenage granddaughter. But I'd learned long ago that desperate circumstances required unconventional approaches. Tuesday afternoon arrived with ominous gray clouds promising rain. I picked up Marion from school at 1:30, and we drove to John and Wilma's neighborhood, a development of modern homes on the north side of town. I parked a block away, and we walked casually to the house, looking for all the world like a grandmother and granddaughter out for a stroll. The key still worked. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Text me if you see anyone, I whispered to Marion, who positioned herself on the front porch with her phone, pretending to scroll through social media. Inside, the house felt cold despite the heating system's hum. I started in Wilma's home office, a converted bedroom on the second floor. The door was locked, but I'd anticipated that. I retrieved a bobby pin from my hair. Thank you, mystery novels. And worked the simple lock until it clicked open. The office was immaculate. Wilma's desk held a sleek computer, a filing cabinet, and several framed photos of her and John. I tried the filing cabinet first. Locked, and with a more sophisticated lock than the bedroom door. I'd need a different approach. The computer was password protected naturally. I tried a few obvious combinations. John's birthday, their anniversary, but nothing worked. Frustrated, I turned to the desk drawers. The top drawer held office supplies. Nothing interesting. The second drawer was locked. I was examining it when my phone buzzed. Marion's text read, "Mailman." I froze, listening. Sure enough, I heard footsteps on the porch, the creak of the mailbox. Then silence. The mailman had moved on. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline making my movements clumsy. I took a breath, steadying myself. I'd survived much worse than this. I returned my attention to the locked drawer, working the bobby pin until, click. Inside, I found a stack of folders. I pulled them out, my heart racing as I flipped through the contents. Bank statements for Morrison Consulting, credit card statements in Wilma's maiden name, and then, buried beneath everything else, a document that made my blood run cold. It was a deed transfer form, prepared but not yet signed, showing the transfer of John and Wilma's house, the house that had been John's before they married, into Wilma's sole name. The date on the form was next week. I photographed everything with my phone, trying to keep my hands steady. There was more. Copies of life insurance policies on John, with Wilma as the sole beneficiary. A business dissolution document for Matthews Landscaping, also unsigned but prepared. She was planning to dismantle everything. My phone buzzed again. Marion. Car turning onto street. I shoved the folders back into the drawer, locked it, and hurried out of the office, pulling the door shut behind me. I was down the stairs and at the front door when Marion burst in. "It's Dad's truck," she gasped. We looked at each other in panic. John wasn't supposed to be home for hours. "Back door," I said, grabbing her hand. We rushed through the kitchen just as I heard John's key in the front lock. We slipped out the back door, crossed the yard, and ducked through the hedge into the neighbor's property. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. We circled around to my car, walking slowly now, trying to look casual even though I was breathing like I'd run a marathon. Once inside with the doors locked, Marion and I looked at each other and simultaneously exhaled. "That was too close," Marion said. "Yes, it was." I started the car with trembling hands. "But you found something, didn't you?" I nodded grimly. "She's planning to take everything. The house, the business, all of it. She's preparing to leave him with nothing." My phone rang. It was John. "Hi, sweetheart," I answered, trying to sound normal. "Mom, weird thing just happened. I came home to grab some papers and I could have sworn I smelled your perfume in the house. And the back door was unlocked. Did you stop by?" My mind raced. "Oh, yes, I did. Earlier this morning. Wilma said you needed those tax documents from last year, the ones I'd been storing. I dropped them off. I must have forgotten to lock the back door. I'm sorry." A pause. "Wilma didn't mention you were coming by. It was spur of the moment. She probably forgot to mention it." I held my breath, waiting. "Okay. Well, thanks for bringing them. Love you." "Love you too." After hanging up, I looked at Marion. "He's suspicious. Do you think he'll tell Wilma?" "Probably, which means she'll know someone was in her office." I pulled out my phone, reviewing the photos I'd taken. "We need to move faster than I planned. Jerry's giving me the financial records tomorrow. Combined with what I found today, I'll have enough to take to the authorities. The police? Maybe. Or a lawyer first. I need to understand the legal implications before I act." But as I drove Marion home, a new worry gnawed at me. Wilma had proven herself to be clever, methodical, and ruthless. If she discovered that I was investigating her, what would she do to protect her scheme? And more frighteningly, what would she do to John if she decided she needed to accelerate her plans? That night, I couldn't shake the image of those life insurance policies, the dissolution documents, the deed transfer. Wilma wasn't just stealing. She was systematically positioning herself to take everything and disappear, leaving John ruined. Unless I stopped her first. My phone buzzed at 10 p.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Matthews?" An unfamiliar woman's voice. "You don't know me, but I'm calling because I think you need to hear something about Wilma Morrison. I'm her ex-husband's sister. And I need to warn you, your son is in serious danger." I gripped the phone tighter, my pulse hammering in my ears. "What kind of danger?" The woman's voice was steady but urgent. "My name is Linda Garrett. My brother was married to Wilma for 3 years. By the time their divorce was finalized, she'd nearly destroyed him financially and psychologically. Mrs. Matthews, I've been watching the public business records. It's a habit I developed after what happened to my brother. When I saw Matthews Landscaping showing unusual transaction patterns, I did some research and found out Wilma had remarried. I had to warn you." "Tell me everything," I said, settling into my armchair, my notebook already open. Linda's story chilled me to the bone. Wilma had married her brother David when he was vulnerable, grieving his mother's death. She'd systematically isolated him from family and friends, taken control of his successful construction business, and then begun siphoning money into hidden accounts. By the time David realized what was happening, she'd transferred nearly $400,000 and had positioned herself to claim his business assets in the divorce. "The worst part," Linda continued, her voice breaking slightly, "was how she did it. She convinced David he was losing his mind. She'd move things and tell him he'd done it himself. She'd schedule appointments and then claim he'd forgotten them. She had him so confused and depressed that he actually believed he was incompetent to run his own business." "Gaslighting," I whispered. "Exactly." By the time we convinced him to see a therapist, Wilma had already filed for divorce and claimed the business was failing due to David's mental instability. She walked away with a settlement, and David was left with nothing but debt and a broken spirit. What happened to him? He rebuilt slowly. It took him 5 years, but he's doing okay now. When I saw Wilma had married again, I tried to find contact information for your son, but she's kept everything so locked down. I finally found your name in some old business articles about Matthews Landscaping. I'm sorry it took me this long. I thanked Linda and asked if she'd be willing to provide a statement about Wilma's pattern of behavior. She agreed immediately, emailing me a detailed document within the hour that outlined everything Wilma had done to her brother, complete with divorce records, financial statements, and even a copy of the restraining order David had eventually filed. I spent the rest of the night reading through Linda's documentation, cross-referencing it with the photos I'd taken from Wilma's office. The pattern was identical. The isolation tactics, the financial manipulation, the gradual assumption of control over the business, even the preparation of dissolution documents before the victim knew what was happening. But there was one crucial difference. Linda's documentation showed that David had survived. John could too, if I acted fast enough. The next morning, I met Jerry at his office. He handed me a thick folder containing 6 months of financial records for Matthews Landscaping. The numbers told a devastating story. $190,000 had been transferred to Morrison Consulting in carefully timed increments. Additional money had been moved to accounts I couldn't trace. The business that had once maintained a healthy reserve of over $200,000 now had less than $15,000 in operating capital. Jerry, has John seen these reports? I asked. The accountant shifted uncomfortably. I send them monthly, but Wilma has asked me to send them to her email instead of John's. She says she reviews them first and then discusses them with him. Mrs. Matthews, I've been doing this job for a long time, and I know when something doesn't smell right. I should have pushed harder. You tried. She blocked you. That's not your fault. I closed the folder. Can you prepare a complete financial analysis showing the timeline of the transfers and the current state of the business? Something detailed enough for law enforcement or attorneys? Absolutely. When do you need it? Today, if possible. Jerry nodded grimly. You'll have it by this afternoon. I left his office and drove to the law firm that had handled Frank's estate. The senior partner, Thomas Brennan, had known our family for 30 years. If anyone could help me navigate this situation, it was him. Thomas listened to my entire story without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Mrs. Matthews, what you're describing is a complex case of fraud, embezzlement, and potentially elder financial abuse. Though in this case, the abuse is directed at your son. The insurance fraud alone is a felony. The business embezzlement is another serious crime. Can we stop her before she takes everything? We can try. But here's the problem. John is an adult who apparently signed documents giving Wilma access to the business accounts. Unless we can prove she forged his signature or coerced him, she has legal authority to make those transfers. The insurance fraud is clear-cut, but the business situation is murkier. What if we can prove a pattern of deceptive behavior? I have statements from her previous victim. Thomas's eyebrows rose. That could be useful. It establishes a history of fraudulent conduct. Combined with the insurance fraud evidence, we might have enough to get law enforcement involved. He paused. But, Mrs. Matthews, I need to be direct with you. The moment we report this to the police, it becomes a criminal matter. Your son will learn everything. His wife will likely be arrested. This will tear your family apart. It's already being torn apart, I said quietly. At least this way, John has a chance to save what's left. Thomas agreed to review all my documentation and prepare a case to present to the district attorney's office. But as I left his office, I felt a weight settling on my shoulders. Once I set this in motion, there would be no going back. John would be furious, at least initially. He might never forgive me for exposing his wife's crimes. But if I did nothing, Wilma would destroy him completely. My phone rang as I reached my car. It was Rachel. Mom, John just called me. He's talking about selling the house. He says they're in serious financial trouble, that the business is failing. He sounded desperate. What's happening? My heart sank. Wilma was accelerating her timeline. Rachel, I need you to trust me. Don't let John make any major decisions right now. Tell him to wait, to talk to me first. He won't listen. Wilma's convinced him that selling the house is the only way to save the business. Mom, something's really wrong, isn't it? I made a decision. Rachel needed to know at least part of the truth. Meet me at my house in 1 hour. Come alone. Don't tell anyone, especially not John. Rachel arrived exactly on time, her face tight with worry. I sat her down at my kitchen table and showed her everything. The photos from Wilma's office, Jerry's financial reports, Linda Garrett's statement about the previous marriage, the evidence of the car insurance fraud. My daughter's face went through a spectrum of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, cold fury. "That manipulative witch," Rachel hissed. "She's been playing him this whole time. We have to tell him right now." "We can't. Not yet." "Why not? Mom, she's about to steal his house." "Because if we confront her without legal backing, she'll disappear with whatever money she hasn't already hidden. We need to have law enforcement ready to act. Thomas is preparing the case now." Rachel stood up, pacing my small kitchen. "How long?" "A few days, maybe a week. We need to make sure everything is documented properly. We might not have a week. If she's pushing John to sell the house..." Rachel was interrupted by my phone ringing. It was Marion, and she was crying. "Grandma, you need to come to the hospital right now. It's Dad. He collapsed at work. They think it might be a heart attack." The drive to Memorial Hospital was a blur. Rachel and I arrived to find Marion in the waiting room, her face streaked with tears. She threw herself into my arms. "They won't tell me anything because I'm not 18 yet," she sobbed. "Wilma's back there with him, and the nurses won't let me see him." I approached the nurses' station, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'm Edith Matthews. My son John was brought in. Can you tell me his condition?" The nurse checked her computer. "Are you his next of kin?" "I'm his mother." "I'm sorry, but his wife is with him now, and she's requested no other visitors until the doctors complete their evaluation." "I'm his mother," I repeated, my voice hardening. "I have a right to see my son." The nurse looked uncomfortable. "Let me speak with Mrs. Matthews, the wife, and see what I can do." Rachel grabbed my arm. "She's keeping us out. She's actually keeping us away from him." Before I could respond, Wilma emerged from the double doors leading to the emergency department. She looked perfectly composed, her makeup flawless, not a hair out of place. When she saw us, her expression shifted to something approximating concern. "Oh, Edith, Rachel, I'm so glad you're here. John is stable now. It wasn't a heart attack, thank goodness. The doctors think it was severe anxiety and exhaustion. They're running more tests to be sure." "I want to see him," I said. "Of course, but he's sleeping now. The doctors gave him something to help him rest. Perhaps it's better if we let him recover peacefully." "I'm his mother. I'm going in." Wilma's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Actually, John specifically asked that only I be allowed in the room. He doesn't want to worry you all. You know how he is, always trying to protect everyone." It was a lie. I could see it in the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine, in the controlled stillness of her posture. John would never ask to keep his family away, especially not Marion. "That's interesting," I said carefully, "because John has never excluded his family from anything important in his entire life. Well, he's under tremendous stress right now. The business troubles have been weighing on him. In fact," Wilma lowered her voice, her tone shifting to something confidential, "the doctors are concerned about his mental state. He's been showing signs of confusion, making poor decisions. I've been trying to shield him from additional stress, but clearly it's becoming too much for him." There it was. The same pattern Linda Garrett had described. Wilma was setting the stage to paint John as mentally unstable, just as she'd done to her previous husband. "I see," I said, my voice ice cold. "And I suppose you've been the one managing his affairs because of this confusion." "Someone has to. The business was heading toward bankruptcy. I've been trying to save what I can." Rachel stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "By transferring almost $200,000 to your private consulting company?" Wilma's composure cracked for just a second, a flash of something dangerous crossing her face before the mask snapped back into place. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Morrison Consulting," I said quietly. "Your company. The one you've been funneling John's business funds into for months." The waiting room had gone silent. Other families were watching now, sensing the confrontation. Wilma's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "You've been snooping. You broke into my house. I visited my son's house, using the key he gave me years ago. You had no right. I had every right to protect my son from a thief and a fraud. I pulled out my phone, showing her one of the photos I'd taken. Is this the deed transfer you're planning to have him sign? Or maybe these life insurance policies where you conveniently made yourself the sole beneficiary? Wilma's eyes narrowed. For the first time, I saw the real woman beneath the facade. Calculating, cold, and very, very angry. You stupid old woman, she hissed. You have no idea what you're interfering with. John is my husband. Everything we own is legally mine to manage. If you try to turn him against me with your paranoid fantasies, I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll make sure you never see him or Marion again. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Wilma straightened, her voice rising to normal volume, her expression shifting back to wounded innocence. I've tried to be patient with you, Edith. I know you've been struggling since Frank died, but this paranoid behavior, these accusations, it's clear you need help. I'll be speaking with John about getting you evaluated. She turned on her heel and walked back through the double doors before I could respond. The security guard near the entrance shifted slightly, and I realized he'd been listening to every word. Rachel grabbed my arm. Mom, she just threatened you. I know. I looked at Marion, who was staring at the doors with an expression of pure hatred. This ends now. Rachel, call Thomas Brennan. Tell him we need to file everything with the police today, not tomorrow. Tell him it's an emergency. What about Dad? Marion asked. We can't just leave him with her. I approached the nurse's station again. I need to speak with hospital security and the patient advocate. My son may be in danger from his wife. The nurse looked skeptical. Ma'am, that's a very serious accusation. I have evidence that his wife has been committing fraud and embezzlement. She's already threatened to have me declared incompetent. I believe she's trying to isolate my son from his family. I need to ensure he's safe. Within 15 minutes, I was sitting with a hospital administrator and a security supervisor, explaining the situation. I showed them the evidence on my phone, gave them Linda Garrett's contact information, and made it clear that I believed John was being manipulated by a dangerous person. The administrator was sympathetic, but bound by policy. We can't prevent his wife from visiting him, Mrs. Matthews, but we can make sure that other family members also have access. I'll note in his file that multiple family members should be allowed to visit. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Thomas Brennan called back within the hour. I've been in touch with the district attorney's office. Given the evidence of insurance fraud and the pattern of behavior from the previous marriage, they're willing to open an investigation. They want to meet with you tomorrow morning. Tomorrow might be too late. It's the best I can do. In the meantime, I'm filing for an emergency restraining order to prevent Wilma from accessing any more business funds. It's a long shot, but the judge might grant it given the evidence of ongoing fraud. That night, I stayed at the hospital despite Wilma's protests. Rachel and Marion took shifts with me. John was moved to a regular room around midnight, still sleeping from the sedatives. The nurse finally allowed us in for a brief visit. My son looked exhausted even in sleep, his face drawn and pale. I sat beside his bed, holding his hand, and whispered to him, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry for what's about to happen. But I promise you, I'm doing this to save you. At 3 a.m, John finally woke. He looked confused to see me there instead of Wilma. Mom? What time is it? Early morning. How are you feeling? Tired. Where's Wilma? She went home to rest. John, I need to talk to you about something important. But before I could continue, Wilma burst through the door, her eyes blazing. Get away from him, she snarled. Security! I need security in here now. And I realized with sinking dread that Wilma had prepared her next move, and it was aimed directly at me. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway within seconds. Wilma pointed at me with a trembling hand, her face a perfect mask of distressed concern. This woman has been harassing me and making wild accusations, she said, her voice breaking convincingly. She broke into our home yesterday. She's been following me. I think she's having some kind of mental episode, and I'm worried she might hurt someone. John struggled to sit up in the hospital bed, confusion clouding his face. Mom? What's she talking about? I stood my ground, keeping my voice calm and measured. John, I haven't been harassing anyone. I've been investigating some financial irregularities in your business accounts. Wilma knows exactly what I'm talking about. You see? Wilma turned to the security guards, her eyes glistening with manufactured tears. She's obsessed with this paranoid fantasy. My husband collapsed from stress because his business is struggling, and instead of being supportive, she's making insane accusations about me stealing money. One of the guards stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. I'm his mother. I have every right to be here. Not if you're causing a disturbance. The guard was polite but firm. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Rachel pushed into the room. Don't you dare touch my mother. John, tell them she's allowed to be here. John looked between us, his face pale and drawn. I don't understand what's happening. Mom, did you really break into our house? I used the key you gave me. I was worried about you. Because of the business? He rubbed his face. Mom, I know things are tight right now, but Wilma's been helping me manage everything. She's been incredible through all this stress. John, she's been stealing from you, I said, fighting to keep the desperation out of my voice. I have proof. Bank records, transfers to her personal company. That's enough. Wilma's voice cracked like a whip. John is recovering from a medical emergency, and you're filling his head with poison. Guards, please remove her, now. The security guard reached for my arm. I pulled back, my heart hammering. John, please, just look at the evidence before you believe her. But my son's face had closed off, that stubborn expression I'd seen 1,000 times settling into place. Mom, I think you should go. You're obviously upset, and I need to rest. We'll talk about this later when everyone's calmer. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son was choosing her over me. Rachel grabbed my hand. Come on, Mom. We're leaving. But John, you need to know that we're not crazy and we're not going away. The police will be investigating your wife starting tomorrow morning. Wilma's composure flickered for just an instant. You called the police? On what grounds? Insurance fraud, for starters. Rachel shot back. That car you reported stolen? It's sitting on a used car lot right now with sales documents showing you sold it 2 days before filing the theft claim. That's a felony. John's head swiveled toward Wilma. What? Wilma, what are they talking about? It's a misunderstanding, Wilma said smoothly, though her eyes had gone cold. The dealership made an error in their paperwork. I've been meaning to straighten it out. An error that involves fake identification and a false address? I said. John, she rented an apartment under her maiden name. She created a consulting company that's been draining your business accounts. She has deed transfer documents ready to take your house. Out, now. The security guard's patience had run out. He took my arm firmly, not roughly, but with clear intent. Ma'am, you need to leave, or I'll have to call the police. I let him escort me out, Rachel and Marion following. In the hallway, I turned to the guard. Please, just make sure my son is safe. Don't leave him alone with her. The guard's expression softened slightly. I'll make a note in the log. But ma'am, you should know, she's already filed a formal complaint against you with hospital administration. Claims you're unstable and potentially dangerous. Of course she had. Wilma was always 3 steps ahead, building her case, destroying my credibility before I could destroy hers. We regrouped in the parking lot. Marion was crying. Rachel was furious, and I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped away my insides. She turned him against you, Rachel said, her voice shaking. She actually made him choose her over his own mother. She's been working on him for months, maybe years, I said quietly. Isolating him, controlling information, making him dependent on her. This is exactly what she did to her previous husband. What do we do now? I pulled out my phone and called Thomas Brennan, even though it was nearly 4 a.m. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice alert despite the hour. Mrs. Matthews? What's happened? I explained the hospital confrontation, Wilma's complaint, John's rejection. Thomas listened in silence. This complicates things, he said when I finished. If she's painting you as mentally unstable, she's trying to undermine your credibility before the investigation even begins. It's a smart move on her part. How do we counter it? You stay absolutely clean. No more visits to their house, no confrontations, nothing she can use against you. Let the authorities handle it from here. I'll contact the DA's office first thing in the morning and push them to move quickly. Can you be at my office at 8 a.m.? I'll be there. After hanging up, I drove Rachel and Marion back to my house. None of us could face going home alone. We sat in my living room drinking tea, waiting for dawn. I should have told him sooner, I said, before she had time to poison him against me. You were gathering evidence, Rachel said. You were doing the right thing. The right thing just got me banned from seeing my son. Marion, who'd been silent, suddenly spoke up. Grandma, what if we can prove she's lying? About the hospital complaint? About you being unstable? What if we can show that she's the one who's dangerous? How? Linda Garrett, the ex-husband's sister. She said Wilma did the same thing to her brother, right? Made everyone think he was crazy? I sat up straighter. You're right. If we can document the pattern, show that this is her standard operating procedure. It might not help with John right now, Rachel said, but it would help with the criminal investigation, and maybe with protecting you from her accusations. I called Linda Garrett at 7 a.m., apologizing for the early hour. She was already awake and eager to help. My brother went through exactly what you're describing, Linda said. Wilma filed complaints against him with his employer, claimed he was mentally unstable, even got a doctor to write a letter suggesting he needed psychiatric evaluation. Of course, the doctor was someone she'd been seeing herself, someone she'd charmed into believing her version of events. How did your brother prove it was false? He didn't, not at first. It wasn't until after the divorce, when he found other victims, yes, there were others before him, that he was able to establish the pattern. Mrs. Matthews, your son is husband number 3. There was another man before David, someone Wilma was married to for less than a year. He died in what was ruled an accidental fall down the stairs. The room seemed to tilt. Died? Heart failure, technically. The fall caused injuries, but he had an underlying heart condition that the stress triggered. There was an investigation, but nothing came of it. Wilma inherited his life insurance and his house. Linda paused. When I saw that your son had collapsed from what they think is stress-related heart issues, I got very worried. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Do you think she's trying to kill him? I think she's trying to push him to the point where his body fails. It's cleaner than outright murder, harder to prove. And if he happens to die while she's in the process of taking his assets, well, she inherits everything anyway. I thought about those life insurance policies I'd photographed, the deed transfer documents, the systematic draining of the business accounts. Wilma wasn't just stealing from John. She was preparing for a scenario where he didn't survive. I need documentation of everything you just told me, I said. The previous husband's death, the medical complaints, all of it. I'll send you everything I have. Mrs. Matthews, please be careful. When Wilma feels cornered, she gets dangerous. At 8 a.m. sharp, I was in Thomas Brennan's office with Rachel, showing him everything Linda had sent. The attorney's face grew grimmer with each document. This is attempted murder, he said flatly. Or at minimum, reckless endangerment. The pattern is clear. She marries vulnerable men, takes control of their finances, drives them to physical and mental breakdown, then walks away with their assets. And one of them died in the process. Will the DA take this seriously? They have to. This isn't just white-collar crime anymore. This is a threat to your son's life. He picked up his phone. I'm calling them right now. But before he could dial, my phone rang. It was the hospital. Mrs. Matthews? This is Dr. Patel, your son's attending physician. I'm calling because there's been a development in John's condition. My heart stopped. What kind of development? He's developed complications, irregular heartbeat, elevated troponin levels. We're running more tests, but I'm concerned this might be more serious than the anxiety attack we initially diagnosed. I'll be right there. Actually, Mrs. Matthews, I should inform you that there's a notation on Mr. Matthews's chart requesting that you not be allowed to visit. His wife indicated you've been causing him distress. Doctor, my son's wife has been poisoning him, I said, the words tumbling out. Not literally, but she's been systematically destroying his mental and physical health. I have evidence that she's done this to previous husbands. One of them died. There was a long pause. That's a very serious accusation. I'm meeting with the district attorney's office in 1 hour with evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and a pattern of predatory behavior. Doctor, please, don't leave him alone with her, at least until the investigation is complete. Another pause. I can't completely prevent his wife from visiting, but I can restrict her visits and ensure that staff are present whenever she's in the room. If there's any indication of foul play, I'm obligated to report it. It was the best I could hope for. The meeting with the district attorney's office was surreal. Assistant DA Rebecca Torres listened to our presentation with increasing interest, reviewing the financial records, Linda's documentation, the insurance fraud evidence. "This is substantial," she said finally. "We'll need to verify everything independently, but there's enough here to open a formal investigation. We'll start with the insurance fraud. That's the most straightforward charge. Then we'll look into the business embezzlement and the pattern of behavior with previous spouses." "How long will that take?" I asked. "The insurance fraud investigation can move quickly, maybe 48 hours to gather evidence and interview witnesses. The rest will take longer, weeks potentially. My son might not have weeks. He's in the hospital now with heart complications." Rebecca Torres leaned forward. "Do you have any evidence that his wife is directly causing his medical issues?" "Just the pattern. Stress, manipulation, control. It's the same thing that happened to her previous husbands. That's not enough for us to act on immediately. But I'll flag this case as urgent. And, Mrs. Matthews, I need you to stay away from your daughter-in-law. No contact, no confrontations. If she files harassment charges against you, it could compromise our investigation." I left the DA's office feeling frustrated. I had evidence, I had witnesses, I had a clear pattern of criminal behavior. And still, Wilma was free to continue manipulating my son. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You should have minded your own business, old woman. Now you'll lose everything." It was from Wilma. She'd gotten a new phone number to contact me. Before I could respond, another text arrived. "John is changing his will today. He's removing you and Rachel as beneficiaries. Marion will be placed in a trust that I control. By the time your precious investigation is finished, you'll have nothing left to fight for." Rachel read the texts over my shoulder. "She's bluffing. John would never cut us out of his will. She's been controlling every aspect of his life for months," I said. "If she tells him we've been harassing her, making false accusations, trying to destroy his marriage, he might do exactly what she wants." Another text. "And if anything happens to John, and given his heart condition, anything could happen, I'll make sure Marion knows it was your stress that killed him. She'll never speak to you again." It was a direct threat, carefully worded to avoid outright admission of intent, but clear in its meaning. Wilma was escalating, and she was using my family against me. "We need to warn John," Rachel said. "Somehow, we need to get through to him. He won't listen to us. She's made sure of that." "Then who will he listen to?" I thought about it, running through everyone in John's life. Most of his friends had slowly drifted away over the past few years. Wilma's influence, I realized now. His business associates were either employees he couldn't confide in or clients he barely knew. The only person who'd been consistently present through everything was Jerry, I said suddenly. "The accountant. John trusts him professionally. He doesn't know Jerry's already provided me with financial records. Will Jerry talk to him? He has to. Because if we can't get through to John before Wilma convinces him to sign away everything, we'll have no legal standing to protect him at all." I called Jerry immediately. He agreed to visit John at the hospital that afternoon, ostensibly to discuss business matters, but actually to show him the financial evidence directly. "I'll tell him the truth," Jerry said. "That the business is being drained, that the transfers don't make sense, that someone needs to explain where the money is going. I won't mention you or the investigation. I'll just present the facts and let him draw his own conclusions." It was a risk. If Wilma was there, she'd shut Jerry down immediately. But it was the only play we had left. That afternoon, I sat in my living room, unable to eat, unable to focus on anything except waiting for Jerry's call. Rachel paced. Marion sat curled on the couch, her phone in her hands, periodically checking for updates. At 4 p.m., Jerry called. "I saw him," he said without preamble. I showed him the financial reports. Mrs. Matthews, I've never seen him so angry. He didn't know about most of the transfers. Wilma had been intercepting all my emails and reports, telling him everything was fine. Did he believe you? He demanded to see the bank statements himself. He's calling the bank right now to get access to the accounts. Jerry paused. But Wilma was there. When she realized what was happening, she had some kind of breakdown. Crying, claiming that she was only trying to help, that she'd hired Morrison Consulting to save the business. She said you'd turned everyone against her, that this was all you're doing. Did John believe her? I don't know. He looked confused, overwhelmed. He asked me to leave so he could talk to Wilma privately. My heart sank. Once again, Wilma had managed to position herself as the victim, turning John's anger into sympathy. Jerry, thank you for trying. There's one more thing. As I was leaving, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. She was talking to someone about moving up the timeline, said she needed to finalize everything before the end of the week. Mrs. Matthews, I think she's planning something. The end of the week. 3 days from now. I thanked Jerry and hung up, my mind racing. Wilma was preparing her endgame. Whether that meant disappearing with whatever money she could grab or something worse, I couldn't be sure. But I knew one thing. I was running out of time to save my son. And Wilma knew I was coming for her. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table organizing every piece of evidence I'd collected, creating a timeline of Wilma's deception that even John couldn't ignore. Bank statements, transfer records, Linda Garrett's documentation, photos from Wilma's office, the car dealership paperwork, Jerry's financial analysis. I arranged it all in chronological order, each piece building on the last, creating an irrefutable narrative of systematic fraud. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed John to see it, to hear it, before Wilma could spin her web of lies around him again. And I needed it to happen in a setting where she couldn't manipulate the situation or play the victim. At 6 a.m., my phone rang. It was Dr. Patel from the hospital. Mrs. Matthews, I'm calling because I think you need to know something. Your son's test results came back, and we found traces of a sedative in his bloodstream, something he wasn't prescribed by our hospital. My blood ran cold. What kind of sedative? A benzodiazepine, commonly used for anxiety. When I asked Mr. Matthews about it, he said his wife had been giving him herbal supplements for stress. But these aren't herbs. This is a controlled substance. Is he in danger? Not immediately, but the levels were higher than therapeutic doses. Combined with his existing heart stress, it could have contributed to his collapse. Mrs. Matthews, I'm obligated to report this to the authorities as a potential case of medication tampering. Please do. And doctor, can you keep him in the hospital for observation? Don't discharge him into her care. I can keep him for another 24 hours based on these findings. After that, if he wants to leave, I can't stop him. 24 hours. That was all I had. I called Thomas Brennan immediately. We need to move now. Today. Can you get the DA to act on the insurance fraud charge? The investigation isn't complete. John has been drugged. The hospital is reporting it. If we don't act now, Wilma will disappear or worse. She'll finish what she started. Thomas was silent for a moment. Let me make some calls. By 9 a.m., I had a plan. Rebecca Torres from the DA's office agreed to expedite the insurance fraud warrant based on the solid evidence from the car dealership. The police would be ready to arrest Wilma within the next few days. But I needed something more. I needed John to understand the full scope of her betrayal before she could twist the narrative. I called John's hospital room. To my surprise, he answered instead of Wilma. Mom? His voice was weak, confused. They told me Wilma gave me something she shouldn't have. I don't understand. She was just trying to help with my anxiety. John, I need you to listen to me. Can you do that? Just listen, without interrupting? Okay. I know you think I've lost my mind. I know Wilma has convinced you that I'm paranoid and unstable. But I need you to meet with me, just once, and look at evidence I've collected. Not accusations. Actual documentation. Bank records. Witness statements. Proof of fraud. If you look at everything and still think I'm wrong, I'll accept that. But please, just give me 1 hour. There was a long pause. Where's Wilma? I don't know. Isn't she there? She left early this morning. Said she had to take care of some urgent business. She seemed nervous. She was moving her endgame forward. Whatever she'd planned to finalize, she was doing it now. John, can I come to the hospital? Please? Another pause, then. Okay. 1 hour. I gathered my evidence folders and drove to Memorial Hospital, my hands steady despite my racing heart. I'd been preparing for this confrontation for days. I knew exactly what I needed to say, exactly how to present the information. No emotion, no accusations, just facts, laid out methodically. But when I arrived at John's room, I found I wasn't the only visitor. Wilma stood beside his bed, her face a mask of tender concern, her hand resting possessively on his shoulder. When she saw me, her expression hardened. I told hospital security you weren't welcome here. John invited me, I said, meeting her eyes steadily. He wants to see my evidence. Evidence of what? Your paranoid fantasies? Wilma's voice dripped with contempt. John, you don't have to subject yourself to this. You're still recovering. I want to hear what she has to say, John said quietly. There was something different in his tone. Not quite doubt, but not complete trust either. The medication revelation had shaken him. I opened my first folder, laying out the car dealership documents on the rolling table beside his bed. This is the bill of sale for your SUV, the one Wilma reported stolen. Notice the date, September 15th. The police report for the theft was filed September 17th, 2 days later. John studied the documents, his brow furrowing. Wilma said the dealership made an error. Look at the signature on the bill of sale, I continued. That's Wilma's handwriting, signing as Wilma Morrison, not Matthews. Look at the address. That's an apartment she rented under her maiden name. The dealership verified she sold them the car herself, showed identification, took cash payment. Then she filed a false insurance claim for $32,000. That's a lie, Wilma said, her voice sharp. They're confused. I have a sworn statement from the dealership manager, I said, pulling it out. And I have the insurance claim form you filed, reporting the car stolen from a grocery store parking lot you never visited that day. I have your credit card receipts showing you were on the other side of town. John's face had gone pale. Wilma? It's all circumstantial, Wilma said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. They're twisting things. I laid out the next folder. These are the financial records from Matthews Landscaping for the past 6 months. Jerry provided them. $190,000 transferred to Morrison Consulting LLC, a company you registered 3 months ago under your maiden name. That's a legitimate consulting firm, Wilma protested. I hired them to help save the business. You can't hire yourself, I said flatly. You are Morrison Consulting. You registered it. You're the sole proprietor. And you've been funneling John's business funds into your personal account. I spread the documents across the table. The LLC registration, the transfer records, the matching account numbers. John stared at them, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder. These transfers? He said slowly. Jerry showed me some of these yesterday. You said they were for business consultants who were helping us restructure. They were, Wilma insisted. I can explain all of this. Then explain this. I pulled out the photos I'd taken from her office. These are deed transfer documents for your house, John. Prepared to transfer ownership solely to Wilma. Not to both of you. Just to her. Notice they're dated for next week. Unsigned but ready. John took the photo, his hands trembling. You were going to take the house? I was protecting our assets, Wilma said, her voice rising. With the business failing, I needed to make sure we didn't lose everything. And these? I laid out the life insurance policy documents. $500,000 in policies on John's life, with you as the sole beneficiary. Marion isn't listed. I'm not listed. Just you. That's normal for married couples. And this? I pulled out my final piece of evidence. The documentation Linda Garrett had provided. This is information about your previous marriage to David Garrett. You used the same tactics. Isolated him from family, took control of his business, transferred funds to hidden accounts. Before that, you were married to Robert Paulson, who died from heart failure after a fall down the stairs. You inherited his life insurance and his house. And now John is in the hospital with heart problems after you've been giving him unauthorized sedatives." The room went silent. John stared at the documents, his face ashen. Wilma's mask had cracked completely, her expression cycling between rage and calculation. "You broke into my office," she hissed at me. "You stole private documents." "That's illegal." "I visited my son's house with the key he gave me," I said calmly. "And yes, I documented what I found, because what I found was evidence of multiple felonies." John looked up at Wilma, and I saw the moment everything clicked into place. Every isolated friendship, every intercepted phone call, every financial decision she'd made without his input. "Tell me the truth," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did you marry me for my money?" Wilma's expression twisted. For just a moment, I saw the real woman beneath all the facades. Cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. "Your money?" She laughed bitterly. "John, you don't have money. Your father built a moderately successful landscaping company. That's not wealth. That's middle-class comfort. But it was enough for what I needed." Which was what? A fresh start. A legitimate business that needed someone to take charge. A man too trusting and grief-stricken to see how badly things were already falling apart, she said. She turned her contempt on me. "You think you're so clever, old woman, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. By the time your precious investigation is complete, I'll be gone, and there won't be a thing you can do about it." "Actually," said a new voice from the doorway, "we've been waiting for the right moment to speak with you." Rebecca Torres stepped into the room, flanked by 2 police officers. She held up a warrant. "Wilma Morrison Matthews, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent." I watched as the officers handcuffed Wilma, her composure finally shattering completely. She screamed at me, at John, at the police, claiming persecution, discrimination, false accusations. But the evidence was overwhelming, and she knew it. As they led her out, she turned back to John one last time. "You were so easy," she spat. "So desperate for someone to love you after your wife died. You practically begged me to take everything." Then she was gone, her voice echoing down the hospital corridor until the elevator doors cut off the sound. John sat frozen in his hospital bed, staring at the pile of evidence scattered across the table. His face was gray, his eyes unfocused. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I said softly, sitting beside him. "I know this is—" "You were right." His voice was hollow. "About everything. And I didn't believe you. I chose her over my own mother. She's very good at manipulation. She's had practice. How much did she take?" I glanced at Rebecca Torres, who nodded permission. "Nearly 200,000 from the business. 32,000 from the insurance fraud. She'd opened credit cards in your name. Another 50,000 in debt. And she was in the process of mortgaging the house without your knowledge." John closed his eyes. "The business is salvageable," I said firmly. "Jerry's already working on recovery plans. The DA's office will help us trace the stolen funds. Some of it might be recoverable. And Marion," his voice cracked, "she witnessed all of this. How do I explain to my daughter that I married a con artist who tried to destroy our family?" "You tell her the truth," Rachel said, entering the room with Marion beside her. "That you loved someone who didn't deserve it, that you trusted when you shouldn't have, and that you're human." Marion rushed to her father's bedside, wrapping her arms around him. "Dad, I'm just glad you're okay. I'm glad Grandma figured it out in time." John looked at me over Marion's head, his eyes wet. "Mom, I said terrible things to you. I let her turn me against you." "Stop," I said gently. "You were being manipulated by someone very skilled at deception. What matters is that you're safe now." Thomas Brennan appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Matthews, the DA wants to know if you'll provide a formal statement for the prosecution." "Absolutely. And there's a reporter here from the local news. Apparently, Wilma Morrison is wanted in 2 other states for similar schemes. Your case might help other victims come forward." I thought about Linda Garrett, about David, who'd nearly been destroyed, about Robert Paulson, who died under suspicious circumstances. If my testimony could prevent Wilma from hurting anyone else, It was the least I could do. I'll talk to them, I said. Over the next few hours, the hospital room became a hub of activity. Police interviewed John. The DA's office collected evidence. Jerry arrived with preliminary recovery plans for the business. Rachel fielded phone calls from concerned friends and family members who'd heard the news. And through it all, I sat quietly in the corner, watching my family begin to heal. Dr. Patel released John that evening with strict instructions for rest and stress reduction. As I helped him gather his belongings, he turned to me. "How did you know?" he asked. "What made you suspicious in the first place?" Marion saw the car at the dealership. Everything else followed from that one thread. A thread you could have ignored. You could have assumed it was a mistake and moved on. I could have, I agreed. But I've learned over 68 years that when something doesn't feel right, it usually isn't. And I learned from your father that family is worth fighting for, no matter how hard the fight gets. John pulled me into a hug, holding on tight. "Thank you, Mom. You saved my life." "That's what mothers do," I said, my voice muffled against his shoulder. But even as I held my son, even as I watched Wilma being processed into the criminal justice system, I knew this wasn't quite over. The legal battles would take months. The business recovery would be challenging. The emotional healing would take even longer. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the memory of Wilma's final words. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." What else had she done that we hadn't discovered yet? What other traps had she laid that had yet to spring? The investigation was just beginning. 3 weeks after Wilma's arrest, I stood in the offices of Matthews Landscaping, watching John review the recovery plan Jerry had prepared. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the framed photos on the wall. Pictures of Frank and me from the early days, John as a young man taking over the business, crews posing with their equipment. A legacy nearly destroyed, now being rebuilt. "We can recover about 60% of what she took," Jerry explained, pointing to the financial projections. "The DA's office has frozen her accounts, and they've found money trails leading to offshore holdings. It'll take time, but we'll get most of it back." John nodded, but his expression remained distant. He'd been that way since Wilma's arrest. Functioning, working, going through the motions, but hollow somehow. The betrayal had carved something out of him that hadn't yet grown back. "The business can survive this," Jerry continued. "You'll need to take on a few smaller contracts, maybe delay the equipment purchases you'd planned. But you're solvent, John. Your father built something strong enough to withstand even this." After Jerry left, John and I sat in the quiet office. Outside, I could hear the crew loading trucks for the day's jobs, the familiar sounds of a business in motion. "I keep thinking about all the signs I missed," John said finally. "The way she always answered my phone. How she discouraged me from seeing you and Rachel alone. The convenient headaches whenever I suggested visiting friends. I thought she was just anxious, maybe a little insecure. I never imagined. She was a professional, John. She'd done this before, refined her techniques. You can't blame yourself for being targeted by an expert. But I blamed you." He looked at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "When you tried to warn me, I chose her. I let hospital security remove my own mother. You were manipulated. That's what she does. She finds vulnerable people and exploits their weaknesses. Your weakness was wanting to believe you could have love again after losing Marion's mother. Is that wrong? To want that? Of course not. It's human. It's beautiful, actually. The fact that you could open your heart again after such loss, that's strength, not weakness." John was quiet for a moment. "The police found something else," he said. "In Wilma's apartment. A notebook where she'd written everything out like it was a business plan. Timelines for gaining my trust, strategies for isolating me from family, even calculations of how much she could extract before I'd become suspicious." His voice shook. Our entire relationship was a spreadsheet to her. I reached across the desk and took his hand. "But look what else they found. Evidence of her crimes. Documentation that will put her in prison and prevent her from hurting anyone else. You're not just a victim, John. You're part of stopping her. Because you wouldn't give up. Even when I pushed you away. I'm your mother. Giving up was never an option." The door opened and Marion walked in, carrying a box of files from the car. At 15, she'd thrown herself into helping rebuild the business, learning the administrative side, even joining John on site visits when her school schedule allowed. The experience had matured her, given her a purpose beyond just recovery. "Grandma," the attorney called, Marion said. "Wilma's trying to make a plea deal. She wants to avoid trial." I'd been expecting this. Rebecca Torres had warned me that Wilma's lawyers would likely push for a negotiated settlement rather than risk a jury trial where all her previous crimes would be exposed. "What are they offering?" John asked. 5 years in prison, full restitution of the stolen funds, and permanent restraining orders against her contacting any of us, Marion read from her notes. In exchange, she pleads guilty to the insurance fraud and embezzlement charges, and the DA drops the investigation into the previous husband's death. John's jaw tightened. So she gets away with possibly murdering someone. "The evidence in that case is mostly circumstantial," I said gently, "and the man's family doesn't want to reopen old wounds. 5 years is a real consequence, John. It's justice. Is it enough?" I thought about that question carefully. Justice isn't always about punishment. It's about preventing future harm and holding people accountable. Wilma will go to prison. Her crimes will be public record. She'll never be able to do this to anyone else. That's what matters. Over the following days, I watched my family slowly knit itself back together. Rachel visited more frequently, helping John reorganize his home, removing all traces of Wilma, redecorating with photos and memories that actually mattered. Marion started therapy to process the trauma of watching her father being manipulated and nearly destroyed. And John, gradually, began to smile again. But there was one more piece of unfinished business. 2 months after Wilma's arrest, I received a call from Linda Garrett. "Mrs. Matthews, I wanted to thank you," she said. "The DA's office contacted me. They're reopening several cases involving Wilma, using your evidence as a template. They think they can connect her to at least 4 other victims across 3 states. Because you didn't give up, because you documented everything so thoroughly, you've given those people a chance at justice too." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd first begun investigating Wilma's crimes, and felt something settle in my chest. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not victory. Just a quiet sense of completion. The doorbell rang. It was John and Marion carrying bags of groceries. "We're making you dinner," Marion announced. "You've been taking care of everyone else for months. Tonight, we take care of you." I watched them move through my kitchen, John chopping vegetables while Marion set the table, their easy rhythm speaking of healing and renewed connection. This was what I'd fought for. Not vengeance against Wilma, but the preservation of my family. During dinner, John cleared his throat. "Mom, I've been thinking about the business. Dad built it, I've run it, but it's always been a family operation. I want to make that official." He pulled out a document. "I'm restructuring Matthews Landscaping as a family trust. You, me, Rachel, and Marion are all equal partners. No one person can make major financial decisions alone. No one can be frozen out of the accounts. And most importantly, no outsider can ever take control of what Dad built. John, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You saved this business. You saved me. This is your legacy as much as Dad's." He slid the papers across the table. "Will you sign?" I looked at the document, at the careful legal language protecting everything Frank and I had built together. Then I looked at my son, at my granddaughter, at the family I'd fought so hard to protect. "I'll sign." The restructuring took several weeks to finalize. During that time, I also made some changes of my own. I updated my will, creating educational trusts for Marion and any future grandchildren. I organized all my financial documents, making everything transparent and accessible. And I wrote a detailed letter explaining everything that had happened with Wilma, a record for future generations about the importance of vigilance, about protecting family, about recognizing manipulation. One afternoon, Rachel and I sat in my garden, drinking iced tea and watching the late summer flowers bloom. "You know what I keep thinking about?" Rachel said. "How everyone underestimated you. Wilma thought you were just a harmless old lady who wouldn't notice what was happening. Even John didn't take your concerns seriously at first. People often underestimate women my age, I said. They see gray hair and assume diminished capacity. But you used that, didn't you? You let Wilma think you were no threat while you built your case? I smiled. Your father taught me that the best battles are won before the fighting starts. Preparation, patience, and knowing when to strike. Those are more powerful than any show of force. I hope I'm half as sharp as you when I'm 68. You'll be sharper. You're learning from my mistakes. Rachel squeezed my hand. You didn't make mistakes, Mom. You saved our family. The trial date was set for October, but Wilma's attorney contacted the DA in September to accept the plea deal. Rebecca Torres called to inform me personally. She'll plead guilty next week, Rebecca said. The sentencing hearing is scheduled for the following month. The judge will likely accept the 5-year recommendation, with the possibility of parole after 3 if she demonstrates genuine rehabilitation. Will she? Demonstrate rehabilitation? Probably not. People like Wilma Morrison don't change. They just get better at hiding what they are. But at least she'll be monitored, and her crimes will be on record. Anyone who bothers to search her name will find the truth. On the day of Wilma's plea hearing, I attended with John, Rachel, and Marion. We sat in the courtroom gallery, watching as Wilma, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her perfect appearance finally stripped away, stood before the judge and admitted her guilt. On the charge of insurance fraud in the first degree, how do you plead? Guilty, Wilma said, her voice flat. On the charge of embezzlement? Guilty. On the charge of identity theft? Guilty. The judge accepted the plea deal and scheduled sentencing. As the bailiff led Wilma away, she turned and looked directly at me. There was no remorse in her eyes, no regret, just cold calculation, as if she was already planning her next move 3 years from now. I met her gaze steadily, unflinching. Let her plan. I'd be ready. Outside the courthouse, a small group of reporters waited. One approached me with a microphone. Mrs. Matthews, you're the one who uncovered this fraud scheme. How does it feel to see justice served? I thought about my answer carefully. I didn't do this for justice. I did it to protect my son and preserve my late husband's legacy. The fact that it prevented Wilma from hurting others is a bonus. But my priority was always my family. What would you say to other people who suspect their loved ones are being manipulated or defrauded? Trust your instincts. Document everything. Don't let anyone dismiss your concerns because of your age or gender. And remember that wisdom and experience are more valuable than youth or strength. We may be older, but we've lived through enough to recognize patterns, to see through deception, to know when something isn't right. The reporter smiled. That's good advice. It's hard-earned advice, I corrected. I hope others won't need it. That evening, the 4 of us, me, John, Rachel, and Marion, gathered at my house for dinner. It had become our weekly tradition, a way of reinforcing the family bonds that had nearly been severed. Marion was telling a story about her journalism class when John suddenly interrupted. Mom, I need to say something. He set down his fork, his expression serious. I've been angry at myself for months. Angry that I didn't see through Wilma. Angry that I chose her over you. Angry that I let her nearly destroy everything. But I realized something today, watching her plead guilty. She was right about one thing. I was easy. I was vulnerable and grieving and desperate for companionship. That made me a target. John, let me finish. I was a target, but I was also saved. Because I have a mother who refused to give up on me. Who risked our relationship, who broke rules, who fought for me even when I was fighting against her. And I want you to know that I understand now what that cost you. The fear you must have felt, thinking I'd never speak to you again. The courage it took to keep investigating even when I told you to stop. Mom, you're the strongest person I know. My eyes filled with tears. I'm just a mother protecting her child. That's what we do. No, Marion said softly. You're more than that. You're a detective, a strategist, a protector. You took down a criminal that the police didn't even know existed. You did all of that at 68 years old, and you did it without firing a gun or throwing a punch. You did it with intelligence and patience and wisdom. Exactly, Rachel added. You're proof that getting older doesn't mean getting weaker. It means getting smarter, more observant, more capable. I used to think I was helping you when I'd visit, making sure you were okay living alone. Now I realize you were never the one who needed help. I looked around the table at my family, 3 generations bound by love and strengthened by trial. We all helped each other. That's what families do. John, you were strong enough to hear the truth when it mattered. Rachel, you stood by me even when it seemed impossible. Marion, you were brave enough to speak up about the car when you could have stayed quiet. We survived this together. John raised his glass. To Mom, to wisdom over youth, to patience over force, to family over everything. We clinked glasses. And in that moment, I felt the weight of the past months finally lift. Wilma would go to prison. The business would recover. John would heal. Marion would grow up knowing she came from people who fought for what mattered. And my house, this modest 2-bedroom home where I'd raised my children, where Frank and I had built our life together, where I'd planned the investigation that saved my family, this house was no longer just a building. It was a symbol of resilience, of legacy, of the quiet power that comes with age and experience. Later that night, after everyone had left, I walked through my home, touching the familiar objects that marked my life. Wedding photos, children's art projects saved in boxes, Frank's reading chair, my grandmother's china, each item a piece of history, a connection to what mattered. I paused at my kitchen table, where I'd first spread out the evidence of Wilma's crimes, where I'd made my plans and charted my course. This was where the battle had been won, not in a courtroom, not in a hospital, but here, in the quiet preparation of a woman who knew her worth and refused to be dismissed. I sat down and opened my journal, adding one final entry to the record I'd been keeping. Today, Wilma Morrison pleaded guilty to her crimes. Justice has been served, the family has been protected, and the legacy has been preserved. I am 68 years old, and I have learned this truth. Age is not weakness. Experience is not irrelevance. Wisdom is not obsolete. We older women are often invisible in this world, dismissed as harmless or irrelevant. But we have lived through wars and recessions, raised children and buried spouses, built businesses and navigated crises. We have earned every wrinkle and every gray hair. And when we choose to act, we are formidable. Let the young underestimate us. Let them think we're confused or fragile or past our usefulness. We know better. And when the time comes to protect what matters, we will do whatever is necessary. Not with violence, not with force, but with the accumulated wisdom of decades well lived. That is our power. That is our strength. That is our legacy. I closed the journal and looked out at my garden, where the evening light cast long shadows across the flowers Frank and I had planted 40 years ago. They bloomed every year without fail, enduring through frost and drought, beautiful in their persistence. Like me, like my family, like everything worth fighting for. The battle was over. The victory was complete. And tomorrow, life would continue, stronger, wiser, and more grateful for the simple truth that love and family are worth any price, any risk, any sacrifice. I was 68 years old, and I had never been more powerful.